All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you all for joining us today. I'm Linda Remsburg, and I'm an associate at Grow and Lead. Today's webinar is the third of 4 mental wellness webinars being provided in collaboration with Great Lakes Recovery Centers as part of our Building Up Nonprofit Employees series. We'd like to thank the Michigan Health Endowment Fund for their financial support in providing this series. In addition to the webinars with Great Lakes Recovery, we're also providing what we call Try It webinars, which are fun, interactive opportunities to learn a new skill or explore a fun activity. Our next one will be in November on photography, so stay tuned for more information about that. We're also hosting Mindful Mondays once a month. These are 30-minute online sessions in the morning to start your week on a relaxing, mindful note. Next Monday, we'll have guided meditation with Angela Miller Porter, and you can find more information and register for that on the training page of our website, glcyd.org. In today's webinar, we're going to be using the chat and the Q&A features at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to use chat to discuss anything between yourselves as participants, and use the Q&A button to submit questions for our presenter. Also, you might want to grab a pen and paper to have handy throughout the presentation. All participants will be muted during the webinar. It's being recorded, and we will email it to everyone who registered. And now I'd like to introduce our partners from Great Lakes Recovery Centers. Amy Poyer is the Community Relations and Marketing Director, and Amy will be handling Q&A today. And Coralie Vos will be our presenter today. Coralie is a licensed social worker and has been an addiction counselor at Great Lakes Recovery for 6 years. So Coralie and Amy, I'm going to turn things over to you now.
Great, thank you so much, Linda. We're going to go ahead and share our screen right now. Just give me a second to get that up and running. And can you see the screen?
We can see it.
Awesome.
Oops, now we can't see it.
I was gonna say. Oh, it crashed on me. Let me reopen that.
The joys of modern technology.
Indeed.
Looks like it's taking a second. Oh, I think I see some movements on the back of my screen. Maybe not. I needed to force quit PowerPoint. So we're going to try and open it again.
I would have already been in panic mode and lost patience.
Linda, you have a copy of this, correct?
I do. It wasn't
It-
the final one though.
Okay, it's open now.
Wonderful.
Let me share the screen again. And you can see it now, correct?
Yes.
Okay. There we go.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amy.
Take it
I
away.
was so technically challenged. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you, Linda, and thank you, Karen, for asking me to do this. I'm presenting a little bit about grief, not as an expert, because I am not. And I think I say that because the only real expert on grief is the person who is suffering and going through that. I chose Grief Meanderings as a title because there is no straightway access to grief. We've all heard different models, and they start with one point and end at another point, and that really isn't how grief goes. You begin with acute grief, with that blindsiding, gut-wrenching agony, and wander your way through several stages until you get to the point where you can accept that loss, leave the person in your heart, and move forward. You don't ever get over grief. You don't ever get over a person. You find a new way to live with that loss. Grief is a real, very individual experience. The only true expert, again, on grief is the person that is suffering. We can walk beside them through that emotional pain. They may not know what they need. We just need to walk that walk with them. And in time in our life, we're going to experience both grief as the person suffering and grief as the person walking beside someone who is doing their grieving. Before I go any further, grab that notebook and pencil that Linda mentioned, because we're going to have a few activities here for you to sort of explore your own ideas of what grief is and how you work through that process. I'd like you to think about 5 elements, people, things, places that are very essential to who you are. Write down those 5 things and identify what they are important about. Why are those important to you? And in these 5 elements, what do you expect you might experience if they were to die or no longer be a part of your life? I'll give you a minute here. Using these same 5 elements, I want you just to think about what your thoughts would be, what your feelings would be if you lost every one of them one by one. So take a minute. What would your feelings be? What would your thoughts be? All right, so what is your definition of grief? Grief is defined as a set of feelings, thoughts, and behaviors that are triggered when a person is faced with death, loss, or a threat of loss. It is a physical, emotional, cognitive, behavioral, and spiritual response to the loss or death of someone, somewhere, or something that is important to you, that you've formed a significant emotional bond. It is personal and unique to each individual. It is a journey, and again, it is not linear. We wind our way through the path. And there is no right or wrong way to grieve. I think it's difficult in our culture to know what to say to someone who is grieving. For the last several generations, death has been removed from the circle of life. We have wakes. Now they're called vigils or visitations, and they're held in funeral homes, but not someone else's own home. Children aren't brought to funerals because we're trying to protect them from that sadness, because we don't believe that they will understand. We don't like to think of our own longevity, and so death becomes something feared, and we avoid thinking about it. So here's another couple of things to jot down. What is your first recollection of death? What was it like for you? How do you remember feeling? And was it someone close to you? Were you included in the experience, planning the celebration, or were you kept apart from that death? How was death explained to you? How do you view death now? My first exposure to death was when I was 4. I remember sitting on my aunt's bed with a couple of other small cousins as my aunt took her last breath. There were several of us who were sitting on that bed with her, patting her legs, patting her arms, loving her. Family members were telling her that they loved her, that they would always remember her. We kids weren't protected from that death. When she took her last breath, we were with her. It was a very sacred and holy experience. Our family shared stories so that she would know we would remember her, and she would always be part of our lives. We came from farming families. Death was a circle of life. You would plant a seed, it would die, it would break open and regrow. What we are dies and gives back to us again. The earth becomes renewed, just as we become renewed when we go through that process of grieving. We looked at spirituality in terms of an afterlife. Our family believed that we would meet loved ones again, wherever that mystery in death is. That is the next step of our life journey. We are spirit. We continue. My parents really were wonderful in helping us kids through the idea of death and loss, accepting that it was a part of life. We could feel sad, we could feel angry, or whatever we felt was okay. But we didn't need to fear death because it was just a part of life's journey. My parents had a pet cemetery for us in our backyard. There were dogs and cats, goldfish, birds, our guinea pig, my pet rats that I raised for years, the rabbits that we decided as we raised them that we really couldn't sell them for food, so we had lots of rats. We raised chippies and squirrels we had tamed, and when I was 8, my brother actually brought home a baby alligator who lived with us for 4 years. So we knew that there was life, and we gave back to the earth. That was part of living. Our culture now has become one of a quick fix. We don't want to feel uncomfortable. We don't want to see someone going through those agonies of death and grief. So we want to help them get through it. Hurry up, it's been 6 months, it's been 9 months. You should be beyond this right now. We give platitudes. And cliches are not helpful. Time heals all wounds. Well, someone going through death is wondering, how long? How long am I going to hurt? I know you feel my so-and-so died. I know how you feel. Really? Do you really know how I feel? Someone actually said, be thankful you can have more children at the death of a child by SIDS. And I can only imagine what that person was thinking. More children? I've just lost my baby. Another one is God never gives us more than we can handle. Well, gosh darn it, I wish God didn't have such a great opinion of me. Oh, and they're in a better place now. Everything happens for a reason. It was God's will. God's will? No, I don't think God wills these horrible, cruel things to happen. Someone dying by a car accident, a soldier killed overseas. That's not God's will. There's no comfort in these things. We find comfort in believing that God is present with us, not that he doesn't make these things happen. The Irish have a term on karma. It means soul companion or journey companion who walks that pathway with you going through that grief. It is a person that cares about you deeply, that lets you speak what you need to speak, lets you cry, lets you weep, and walks with you. The Anamacara encourages you to tell the stories. What were the stories that were going on with that person? What were the special things about them? How long had you known them? How did they invigorate your life? How did you help their life? The Anamacara weeps with you. There's no magic to grieving or helping someone through grief. You simply are present, being present to that person, caring for that person, sometimes not even knowing what to say. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you're going through this suffering. I'm sorry this happened to you. I can't imagine what you're going through. I'm at a loss for words, but I care about you. How can I help? We want to use the names of those who have died. Use the word death, not loss. Even though death is a type of loss, someone who dies, it's a deeper feeling. It's a different way of mourning. I had a close friend who several years ago lost an adult son. And her son was a marvelous young man. He was a part of many of our lives. He'd been disabled, and you'd never know it. He was a real social character. Everybody loved him. And he died unexpectedly because of a medical emergency. And those first milestones, that first year, everything that you go through, all of the anniversaries that you go through are torture. The birthday, Christmas, holidays. And at her first doctor's visit after her son had died, her doctor said to her, I'm so sorry you lost your son. And my friend's response was, I haven't lost my son. I know exactly where he is. My son died. He's not lost. And that response to me, as someone who walks that journey with someone who is grieving, the Anamacara, had such an impact on me because it speaks to how far our society has moved away from acknowledging death, trying to make it softer somehow. And in so doing, we've moved away from the comfort of our faith, of believing that it's really only part of our spiritual journey, and that our spirits, our souls continue on. We have not lost someone. While they may not be physically present to us, spiritually, we are still connected to them. For people who do not have a faith tradition, grief can be like walking through a dark tunnel without hope of finding light or comfort. Walking through that grief journey with them, helping them not feel alone, can be an immense comfort. So a couple of little activities here. Take a moment and jot down if you've ever experienced that Ahamkara partnership with someone, that soul journeying with someone. Walking along with someone who is grieving. What were those challenges? What were the gifts that you and the person mourning experienced? And then take a moment. Besides death, what are some other losses that you can identify? Go ahead and put some of those in the chat room if you'd like. I'll give you a second. Are you spotting any, Amy?
Not yet, but we're having an issue with the chat on this end. So Linda was going to take a look. Oh, looks like Mackenzie had a thought. But we'll go ahead and go and, oh, here we go. So health is another one that somebody mentioned.
That brings back the fear of our longevity. So as you might be thinking and adding some more, I'll just go through a brief list. Death we've mentioned, divorce, our home and financial security, bankruptcy, our loss of independence. So many of our seniors struggle with this, our health, plans that we have made for what our life is going to be like, our hopes and dreams when those things fail. If there's addiction within ourselves or a family or friend, a loss or crisis of faith, when relationships end, when we lose personal things, perhaps by fire. And then there's also the positive things that we normally don't think about, may have a sense of loss, but they do. If we're relocating somewhere, maybe it's even because of a promotion, that's an exciting thing. However, it also means that we're leaving something behind. We're leaving people behind, maybe a home that we loved, a location that we loved. When we graduate from something, you've spent years preparing to become a social worker or a nurse or engineer, and all of a sudden you've got that piece of paper in your hand. Now what? That security of knowing is gone. Now you're moving into the unknown. Those are losses. So then how do we experience grief? Grief is a mind-body experience. I mean, we experience this with our heart and our soul, physical, spirit. We have physical reactions, emotional responses, cognitive responses, behavioral and spiritual. We may have stomach aches, fatigue, insomnia, hypersomnia. We may have pressure in the chest, that gut-wrenching, I can't breathe pain. Emotionally, we may experience anger and sadness, shock, anxiety, depression, panic, fear, emptiness, loneliness, hopelessness, sometimes apathy, and sometimes wondering why go on. People have suicidal thoughts. We have cognitive disturbances. We can't believe this. We become confused. Short-term memory loss, preoccupation about the deceased. Everything you think about is about the person that has died. We yearn for that person. We have vivid dreams of them. They are a part of our every thought and waking moment. Behavioral responses, isolation. We may become socially withdrawn. Absent-minded behavior. Put something down and I can't remember what I was doing. We lose interest in those things that had once been important to us. The things that brought us joy no longer do. We may be restless. We may be hyperactive. Again, we may have thoughts of self-harm or suicidal thoughts. Spiritually, we may blame God, questioning the very presence of God. If God loved me, why would this happen? If God loved so-and-so, how could such a horrible thing happen? And again, that goes back to that blaming stuff, and we really want to not say this was God's will. We may question the meaning of life, wishing to join the person who died. And just briefly on suicidality, I want you to think about if you are with someone who appears to be very depressed, if they are talking a lot about their own death, if they're wondering about the purpose of their life, don't leave it to question. Ask them, are you thinking of killing yourself? Are you thinking of harming yourself? I don't want anything to happen to you. Do you have a plan? How would you do that? And from those questions, you want to discern, would they be capable of carrying out a suicide? And then you want to get that person to help. If you have to bring someone to them to help them, a pastor or someone close to them, don't ever leave thoughts of possible suicide in a vague, vacant thought. Bring it out in person. That the thought that if we speak of suicide, it might make them want to do it. That's not true. We want to confront that thought right up front. So I'll just briefly go into some types of grief. There are disenfranchised loss or grief, and that's when, for whatever reason, our needing to grieve isn't recognized by society. This can occur where same-sex partners haven't come out. They are married or connected to a person of the same sex. It's not culturally acceptable. And so if that partner dies, they grieve in silence without support. A man by Kenneth Doka suggests that grief can become disenfranchised in three main ways. The loss is not sanctioned or given permission to experience, such as a loss of limb, loss of mobility, abortion, spontaneous miscarriage, death by suicide. The relationship is not sanctioned, as I already noted. Or the grievers themselves are not sanctioned. A person's ex-husband or wife dies. They have children together, but because there's been years separating that divorce, you're not supposed to still have feelings, right? And that partner, even though they've been separated for a long time, grieves. Ambiguous grief is loss of clarity or closure. These can exist with prisoner of wars. They went to war, they never came home. There is that constant doubt of what happened to them. Someone who has been kidnapped and not found, a missing person. There's no body found. So are they dead? Are they just lost? Where are they? Do we grieve? Do we keep hope? That's ambiguous. Complicated traumatic grief. That's a loss over a period of time where you have difficulty taking care of yourself, getting up and showering, eating properly, taking care of those activities of daily living. This complicated or traumatic grief can move into what we now call persistent complex bereavement disorder, which is a part of the Diagnostic Statistical Manual 5. And we're always very careful about using that diagnosis because in a way it sounds like grieving is maladaptive, and it's not. Grieving is a part of life. We all experience it in many different ways. It's when that grief keeps us locked in that grieving moment and we can't move forward. I think we've all experienced anticipatory grief where we grieve ahead of time. My mom was 98. She'd been in a nursing home for 2.5 years. I knew that her death was coming, and all that time I was trying to prepare myself for that. And you never really quite do. Acute grief is what we experience right away. It's that, again, blindsiding, breathtaking, chest pressuring agony when someone dies. Sometimes there's a delayed grief response. When you're in a car accident, you may not feel right away that you have a horrible gash. Same with death. When someone dies, you may go into shock, and it takes a little while before you begin to experience those emotions. Frozen grief. When a person is in a perpetual state of grief, there is no indication that they are moving forward. They continue to experience almost as an acute grief on and on and on. And we begin to worry about their well-being. That again can move into that complicated grief. With the COVID pandemic, we've seen a number of ongoing complicated grieving, maybe some ambiguous grief as well. For so many of us, we weren't able to be with the person when they died. You see a picture, you're not able to go to a funeral. There is not or was not the way that we normally mourn someone. And that has caused a long-term impact on people that have lost family members during that pandemic when we couldn't share that pain. We're also learning more now of something called collective grief or collective trauma. And that's a shared cultural belief of a culture that has experienced trauma, racial discrimination over several generations. So just briefly, we're aware of some of the models of grief. I know most people have heard of the Kubler-Ross stages of grief. Denial, this can't be happening to me. Anger, why? Why is this happening to me? Why did so-and-so die? Or why did such and such happen? Bargaining, I'll do anything. God, I will come back to church. God, I will do anything. Don't let someone die. Depression. What's the point of going on when so-and-so has died? What's my purpose now? And then finally, acceptance. It's going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. Finding a way of living with that loss, moving beyond that person's death. The Journey Through Grief, the Gift of Grief model by Dr. Ahita M. Robinson is a little bit different type of model. It doesn't have quite the same exact steps going through it. Speaks of needing to recognize the reality of loss, recognizing that you have to go through that grieving process, understanding that grief is a survival mechanism. We have to survive that person's death. We have to survive the loss of whatever experience. And there is no way to grieve. Grief is cumulative. I'm sorry, I had turned that off. There's no right way to grieve. There's no one way to grieve. Grief is cumulative. If you lose someone 6 years ago, when you lose someone today, you're going to go back to that original loss and think about it, think it through. Grieving does not prevent us from living in the present moment. We keep going through the steps. We get up, we wash our face, we brush our teeth, we go to work, but that pain still continues with us. We grieve both in anticipation of loss and when they occur. We acknowledge that grief is a lifelong journey, unanchored by time. It comes and goes. Our grief goal is not to resolve the loss, not to get over the person who has died or the situation that occurred to us, but find and create a new life to live post that death or after that loss, so that our life looks different. We still experience that discomfort, but our life looks different. And then finding the gift in grief requires that, excuse me, that we find a new purpose for ourselves. What is our purpose after that person's death? What is our purpose after that loss? And we reinvent ourselves. The last model I'll speak of is by Zoll and Shiner, and they look at it from a less linear perspective than the earlier forms and models. They kind of chunk different experiences together. When there is an event, a death happens, there is that initial reaction, what we feel, what our response is. And there are a number of responses that go along with that. Our working grief, that process of reconstructing ourselves, finding who we are as a person, maybe as a family after death has occurred, after loss has occurred. And then forever grief, remembering, allowing ourselves to remember what that person meant to us, what that event meant to us, and going forward. And those memories will always be a part of us. The interesting thing about this model is they go through and they use words that start with RE to kind of allow you to formulate where you are in any of these events. They suggest words like reflect, react, retell, reconcile, resilience, release, relinquish, relief, repair, recognize. And their model is really very interesting because it's something that can work with people in grieving in all stages. Children especially can connect to some of those words. What do they react? Retell the story. Tell us what you're thinking. Just for the heck of it, sometime Google books on grief. I think you will be surprised at how many books there are out there, how many models there are out there to help people through grieving, or to help us know how to help someone through grieving. For the most part, we just want to get through and survive. Some people may be interested in exploring their gifts of walking the grief journey with someone. And there are programs out there to become certified as a grief counselor. And you can find many of those online as well. So I'm going to ask another activity, and again, use the chat if you want to share. Jot down, what was it helpful for you during a time that you experienced death or helped another person through their grief? What was helpful? What made it easier? I'm trying to be watchful of time here. I'm going to kind of move forward. If you are supporting someone who is grieving, loss, the presence of family, having somebody with you while you are going through that, not being alone, knowing that others share that pain, that's so vital. The toughest thing for people is if they are alone or estranged from family. A daily meditation book, yes. Finding what other people's thoughts are on grief, giving suggestions about how you can move forward, giving hope on a daily basis. I'm seeing I could hide in the bathroom with it. Well, you can carry it all anywhere. If you have to hide your grieving, that makes you isolated. And faith, absolutely. I don't know how people get through grieving without faith. And that takes a very particular companion to walk through grieving and anxiety when someone is without faith. Trying to honor through my behaviors or activities the person who has died, absolutely. And I suggest this with people that are coming up on anniversaries, maybe birthdays, holidays. How can you incorporate that person into this day and give honor to their memory? My godson died when he was 7 from leukemia, and his mom was Native American. And at Thanksgivings, we set a chair and a plate filled with food in honor of Michael's presence and life. And that just reminds us that he is always with us. I think when we're supporting someone through death or loss, we need to emotionally validate them. We want to listen from our heart, reflect back to them what they're experiencing. Most of all, just be there, just show up. Sometimes we don't even know what to say. We're just there. Hold their hand, look at them, let them put their head on your shoulder, put your head on their shoulder because you are grieving with them. Find out what their particular culture, religious, or spiritual beliefs are. If we want to help them, we want to give honor to the way they believe, the way they have faith. If you're comfortable, pray aloud with that person. Sometimes they will say, I'm hurting too much, I can't grieve, I can't pray. And remind them that the Spirit knows our heart, knows our experiences, knows what we need, even without words. And in the groaning of their heart, the Spirit hears us. Ask about specific tasks, saying, let me know if I can do something to help. Well, they're not going to tell us because they really don't know. They're in shock. It's too vague. So specifically, is there someone that you can call for them? Is there, can you call a pastor? Are there appointments that need to be canceled? Do they need somebody to watch their children or sit with an elder while they go and take care of business and things that have to be done? And sometimes if they're in a panic, as so often you are after shock, just saying, take a deep breath. It's okay. We don't need to get this done immediately. Giving honor to some cultures do have time frames about when something needs to be done, when certain prayers need to be said. Again, talk to their pastor if they're not able to tell you, or their rabbi or their shaman. They can help you find out what it is that they need. In our culture, we bring food. Some people are so inundated with food, they don't know how to serve it. Ask, they need paper plates, cups, plastic cutlery. What are the things that they need? Offer to help them make a memory board or a collage, adding photographs or pictures from magazines. This is a tool that works very, very well with children. Children may not have the words that they need to express what they're feeling. Help them make a memory board. Help them to just put pictures from a magazine about what they're feeling. Take a walk with them. Get them out of the building, the house, whatever, for a little bit of time so that they have a chance to catch their breath. Invite them out to eat. Take them to a movie. I remember during my dad's visitation, I was just exhausted. In those days, visitations were 2 days at the funeral home, and then the third day was the funeral. My best friend dragged me out and said, "You're going to eat," and got me out of the building, went across the street to Vango's, got a hamburger. I don't remember how much I ate, but it was probably the first I'd eaten since my dad had died. When you yourself are the person who is grieving, if possible, let people know what you need. And when you are anticipating someone's death, when you are keeping a vigil with someone, as they're preparing for their death, ask them what they're thinking. Are there thoughts that they need to share? Are they afraid? How can you help them? If you're comfortable, pray aloud with them. In whatever faith tradition they are, share those prayers with them. If you're not sure about what that loss would be or what that faith would be, just say, "You are beloved. The spirit that loves you is with you." If you're keeping a vigil, ask a loved one to spell you so that you can take a break, walk outside, catch your breath. Try to get enough sleep. This is a tremendously chaotic time. And particularly just following a death, you want to maintain some semblance of balance. And I also want to let you know that people that are dying often sense when they're dying, and to a certain degree choose when they're going to die. I kept a vigil with my mother for days and hours. She was never left alone. And finally, the nursing staff said, "You've got to go home and get some sleep. You're exhausted." So I went home, and I bet I just dozed off when the call came that my mom had died. And I was a bit angry that I wasn't able to be present with her. I wanted to share that time with her because it is a very holy, sacred time. But I think that was her last bit of parenting, her last thing that she could do to try to protect me, even though I didn't want to be protected. She was still mom. When I was keeping vigil, I had gone through our hymnals. She'd given me some ideas of what she would like at her funeral. And she'd given me one song. Music was tremendously important to my mom. She'd been a concert pianist. And so I went through our entire hymnal and selected and then prioritized those hymns that would have meant the most to her and described her the most. Write their story. I did the eulogy for my mom, and I spent quite a lot of time writing her story, writing those things about her that I wanted to share. And there were many people that didn't know some of the things that I had shared. Grieving consumes so much of your energy. Give yourself time to feel. Try to eat. Drink plenty of water, non-alcoholic fluids, beverages that you can regenerate, Gatorade, orange juice, something that will keep those electrolytes of your own going because you are exhausted. Let yourself cry. Exercise, if only just walking outside and stretching your arms. Validate your own emotions. Accept them. Be compassionate with yourself. If you need to go outside and scream, go outside and scream. I went to the beach and I threw rocks into the water and screamed. Keep a journal. Writing is a healing tool. With children, have them draw pictures. That can help their feelings. We want to remember that children are grieving too. As our grandparents, other family members, we want to help them express their feelings. We want to include them in those tasks because they help everyone. I had my grandchildren draw pictures for their grandmother, and we put them in the casket. They were sharing of themselves. That helped them with their grief. And let yourself have those emotions. I think you can hear it in my voice as I think of some of those tender moments that I experienced. Unanticipated grief, something that happens suddenly. There's shock, disbelief, anger, that horror, that bargaining. Ask a professional or family member to help you navigate all of those things that you were not prepared to do. Pastors, rabbis, priests, funeral home folk are they're called to what they do, and they're called to help you, and in whatever way they can, they will help you navigate those steps. If you're walking that journey again, pray with someone. Help them know that if they can't pray, you can pray for them, or again, the Spirit hears what you are feeling. There's lots of tasks that go along with a sudden death. Ask people to help. Figure out what it is, prioritize what you need, and delegate that to other people. This is a time that you don't need to be in control of everything. Let other people help you. And again, write the story of that person who has died. That can be shared during the celebration of life services, along with the picture board, the collages, things that are going to help you remember that person and carry them with you. When the funeral is over, when the people have gone home, when the phone calls end and the chaos stops, that silence is so loud. You don't know what to do. So get back into a routine. Let yourself sleep, exercise, eat, spend time with family, friends, share stories. And I'm running out of time. I'm sorry. I hope that you will you take these PowerPoints with you to get some ideas. Just quickly back to those activities. And I know I'm again running out of time. I'm sorry. How has grief changed you? How has your idea of what grief is changed you? When I asked you to think about all those important things and losses, particularly the one of letting go and losing every part of those 5 things, I suggested that because when someone has Alzheimer's or dementia, they are piece by piece, step by step, losing everything that is important to them. And we go through that with them. It is a very painful way to die. It is a shrinking of their brain, a forgetting of all those things that is important to them. And knowing that's what's going on can be helpful. How have your thoughts of your first memory of death changed? Is there anything new that you've heard that will give you comfort? What have you learned differently that you'll navigate differently? Yes, grief support groups are essentially important. Most communities have them. Often a hospice will have them. I'm seeing that Lake Superior Life Care and Hospice has one from 5:30 to 6:30. September 21st, it's open to all. Also a life care and hospice. So hopefully these will be up on the chat and you can jot them down. I hope that this presentation has been helpful to you. There aren't any open questions. But I think there's probably a place to email or something if there are questions and I can be helpful. Look at the quotes at the end, hang on to those because I think some of them are particularly helpful. We never lose the person who has died. They're always with us. We continue to have a relationship with them. Once they're gone from this world, their spirit lives on in the next, and we continue to be with them. And in Romans, it speaks about we are always available to having the Spirit pray for us. They know what we are going through. The Spirit hears us and is able to go through it with us. That is Romans 8:26. Likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know how to pray as we ought or might, but the very Spirit intercedes with sighs too deep for words. When we are crying, the Spirit hears and God is with us. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a blessed day.
Coralie, thank you so much. That was an amazing presentation with so much helpful information and a lot to unpack.